Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Mrs. Sarr just stood up here and asked you to convict Jordan Ryder for the death of his daughter. With a request like that, with the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt resting on her shoulders, I would expect her to provide you with certainty. Instead, she gave you assumptions. Because what the prosecution is desperately hoping you won't notice is that in order to believe their case, you have to make one key assumption. You have to believe that there was anyone to blame here at all. And when you take away that assumption, their case falls apart. When you take away that assumption, you start to realize that the prosecution has been stuck on the wrong story. They're stuck on evidence that at face value looks like it could support their case. But they're so blinded by their own version of what happened that they can't see any possibility in which Mr. Ryder could be innocent. For instance, if the words, "I'm so sorry this happened, it's all my fault," aren't the words of a guilty man, but of a desperate father who wishes he could have been there to stop his daughter from doing something dangerous. That, of course, he was angry that she lost her phone, but today, Mr. Ryder would do anything to turn back time and tell her it was going to be okay. Or a life insurance policy that they cite as a motive, but that doesn't make sense, does it? Because Mr. Ryder wasn't even the beneficiary on this life insurance policy, his brother was. So if money is a motive, Mr. Ryder doesn't have one. He wouldn't have gotten any money from this anyway. His name is listed on here as a policyholder, but if you look at this document, there's no beneficiary form to be seen. Just another assumption that the prosecution is asking you to make. Another way that they didn't do their due diligence in their investigation of this case. I mean, let's just look at the police investigation here. Detective Chesney took that stand and she promised you she did a thorough investigation. But the evidence in this case disagrees. Because the prosecution's own witness, Kelly Dews, stood up on that stand and she told you what the detectives did on the day they found Parker's body. The moment they found Parker's body, they were already treating this as a homicide. Detective Chesney told you that herself when she was sitting on that stand today. And Kelly Dews told you that her officers, as soon as they found that body, said, "I can't believe Jordan Ryder did this. Jordan Ryder should have never gotten out." Just 3 hours after the detective had found out that Jordan Ryder had just gotten out of prison. And with those statements, any illusion that this was a fair and unbiased investigation has gone out the window. Because members of the jury, the police weren't unbiased here. And we heard that again from Cameron Lee when she took the stand just a minute ago. She said that she told the police that she saw Jordan Ryder and Parker Paige leaving that trail together. And then she told you what the police did. They said, "You can go home. We don't need to hear any more from you. No, I know we told you that you needed to do an identification of Jordan Ryder, but you don't need to do one anymore." And then they never called her again. When the police were faced with evidence that could have exonerated Jordan Ryder, they didn't investigate it, they buried it. That's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, members of the jury. It's just not. That is reasonable doubt. So let's talk about the other assumptions that the police made in this case, because I'm going to be honest with you, there's a lot of them. I mean, just look at the murder weapon that they're alleging exists in this case, members of the jury, we don't even know if that's a murder weapon at all. Dr. Lopez took the stand, and he told you that this absolutely could have been an accident. And you know what? Dr. Quincy agreed with him. In her initial report, she said, this doesn't have to be a homicide, it could have been an accident. It was only because she looked at that hiking stick that she changed her mind. But does that hiking stick really match this bruise? Because what Dr. Lopez told you on that stand is that because Parker had brittle bone disease, the bruise actually wouldn't even be the same size as the implement that made it. So maybe the fact that that bruise was 2.25 centimeters isn't evidence that that hiking stick caused it, but it's actually evidence that it couldn't have. And what's very interesting about the medical examiner's report here, about Dr. Quincy's report, I mean, look at these bruises. They all look almost exactly the same size. And that's because Dr. Lopez told you they were all between 2 and 3 centimeters. I mean, these two bruises are just 1/4 of a centimeter apart. And then he told you that these two bruises, Dr. Quincy concluded they absolutely could have been caused by that fall, when Parker hit a branch or a rock. So why not this one? Why didn't Dr. Quincy ever investigate if this one could have been caused by that too? If we know that there were branches and rocks on that trail that were between 2 and 3 centimeters, the exact size of this bruise, why didn't they investigate that? It's a good question. Another good question, why didn't they investigate the DNA? Because Dr. Lopez told you that there was serous fluid coming out of that bruise when they found the body. The same kind of fluid that's in saliva. And they never tested the bottom of that hiking stick, the hiking stick that they're so convinced pushed Parker Paige off that cliff and caused that bruise. They never tested it for Parker's DNA. Members of the jury, in this day and age, how do you call something a murder weapon if you haven't even found the victim's DNA on it? What we're starting to see is that the prosecution is asking you to make a lot of assumptions here. And we gotta look at the biggest one of all. The prosecution has not given you one single reason that Jordan Ryder would have killed his daughter. All we heard on that stand today was Jordan Ryder saying how much he loved her, how much he wanted to take care of her. Why would he push her off that cliff? They're asking you to make assumptions, but we can't do that. In fact, the law tells us exactly what to do here. The law tells us that when the prosecution starts asking you to make assumptions, there's only one presumption you can make. Innocence. Members of the jury, Parker Paige's death wasn't a crime, it was a tragedy. And every day since July 14th, 2018, Jordan Ryder has not only had to relive that tragedy, but now he's being faced with the possibility of a new one. I don't know if there's a right ending to a story like Mr. Ryder's, but I know what the wrong one is. And it's the one the prosecution is asking you to write. So deliver a just verdict for Mr. Ryder. The only verdict that the evidence demands. Find Mr. Ryder not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you.